Good evening. This Committee on Appropriations, Public Debt, Legal Affairs, Retirement, Public Parks, Recreation, Historic Preservation and Land will now reconvene. I want to thank everybody for their cooperation and patience. I know we went late last night, and today we'd like to hear from a number of the government employees who want to speak on this issue. There were some people that signed up last night that didn't speak, and I'll just, Mr. Murphy, we'll start with you. Judge Bordali, did you wish to speak? Let's see, Albert, David John spoke last night. Bartholomew Paris? President Underwood, oh, welcome back. James Duenas? That was last night's list. Dr. Rowan, come on. Let me get these, and then we'll go back to you guys, okay? Why don't we start with Mr. Murphy, and then His Honor, then the President, and then we'll have the university be there. Thank you. Go ahead.
My name is Ken Murphy. I'm a teacher at JFK High School, and I'm a defined contribution member of the retirement fund. I got involved with Senator Ben Pangilinan with the discussion on the plan that he had proposed, and I'm thankful to his staff, Lisa, and of course to Senator Cruz for continuing Senator Ben Pangilinan's movement to get this legislation for the retirement fund members. I want to state clearly that I am not for this plan. Although I worked with Ben, I talked with Ben about it, and at that time we were in discussion. But after going through some analysis, I just can't. I have to categorically say I'm not for this plan. I asked the legislature for a do-over to the defined benefits plan, like the West Virginia educators in 2008, and also asked the legislature to direct the retirement fund to really do due diligence and come up with a better plan than that proposed in this bill. The retirement fund is looking at an unfunded liability that has nearly tripled in 16 years, from 522 million in 1995 to 164 billion in 2011, and they are making a knee-jerk reaction like they did in 1995 and introduced the defined contribution plan. This tripling of its unfunded liability still occurred after they established the defined contribution plan as a solution. So I don't think that the defined contribution plan was a solution. In fact, I think that the defined contribution plan exacerbated the problem exacerbated the problem with the defined benefits plan, and also, as we know, it's affected members who are in the defined contribution plan. Mr. San Agustin last night stated that he regretted starting the defined contribution plan, and they're trying now to remedy. But I'm proposing that the defined contribution plan, now it's a twofold problem. The defined contribution plan is a problem, and the defined benefits plan is a problem. Now, I want to explain why this problem has occurred. I draw your attention to an equation here on the screen, and this is an asset liability equation. On the left side is contributions and investments, and on the right side, the liability side, is benefits and other expenses. Now, what has happened is with these variables working together, people who one, there has to be contribution. I think the contribution has to be made, and two, I think it was alluded to last night about discipline, and I think there has to be a discipline from the sponsor of the plan. So the employees will provide their contribution, and the government will contribute, and they have to be disciplined about contributing. And what has happened is in the equation, okay, we're looking at, I'm just showing numbers. These are numbers from 2012, and it's and a lot of the numbers that I'll be quoting tonight are from 2012. If we look at the contribution side, the contribution, okay, with the defined benefit, look how many people are retired. Their benefits is being paid out to them. That's a liability. Benefits is being paid out to them. That's almost double of the people who are contributing in the defined benefits plan as it is. This is 2012, and what it is not only are they is the contribution needed for their benefits, but it's also the 3,000 people who are contributing. Their benefits too is already calculated in. Okay, so what happened with the defined contribution plan, when it came up, there was no more funding. There's no more contribution going in there, and the people in the defined contribution, as we know, have to struggle with market forces and all of those things to where they are. And we know that it was said that they were doing like, the average was like 40,000 in their balance. But that aside, that's one of the problems I cite, and because they took the defined contribution members out of the equation, the contribution does not equal. Okay, the contribution does not equal the benefits that need to go out, and I think that's what caused the unfunded liability. Okay, and so what's expected from the equation is that we have to bring back. I think what's being attempted now is that they want to bring back. They want to bring back into the defined contribution plan this 7,000 individuals. They want to bring in their money. That's what the hybrid is going to do. It's going to bring our money in to commingle with their money, and they're going to use that to invest. Okay? Now, so they put in a defined benefits plan, but the problem is, the speaker asked about it last night, is that we're going to okay, and these are numbers that I got from. These are the numbers that I got from Senator Pangalinen's office, and this is like from 2012, but they're expecting the people, so they're bringing in the defined contribution to put in the money into the defined benefits, and that will help them, because it will cause the benefit side to increase. I mean the asset side to increase, and there'll start to be an equilibrium between the asset side and the liability side. The only thing is what they're saying is that we're going to contribute 9.5%. That's the same percentage that the defined benefits people are paying. But right here in this number, this is a 4.8%. That's a contribution from the employer. Okay, from the employer. And last night they put up a number 1.8. Okay, why aren't they matching? Now, and then that was asked, why aren't they matching? Or it was asked there, and I myself, I don't know why, but I'm going to guess. Okay, I'm going to guess that that hybrid allows them to do that. I don't know if there's any legal or any stipulations about a hybrid, but I think I might be, and that's a question I want to ask the retirement fund. Is that hybrid piece, because it's a 1%, and last night we were trying to get across. If you're saying the defined benefits as an aggregate was a safer, and they were managed well, they will make money. Why that 1% sticking out there? That was asked last night, and they never gave sufficient answer. But my suspicion is that 1% actually allows the retirement fund to lower the contribution and allow them not to match the employee's contribution. I don't know, but I want to ask that question. Okay, and then if you're going to ask us to help, you're going to ask the $7,000 to help fund the defined contribution plan and get it to equilibrium. I wish that you will structure it, be fair about it. The benefits, 1.7%. 1.75%. I think the highest rate rate per year for the defined benefits is like 2.5%. So you want our money to go and contribute. You're going to use our money to invest and help the defined benefits plan, and you're saying that, yeah, it's going to help us. Yeah, it's going to help us, but you're using our money, and it's not, pay us for using our money. That's what I'm saying. Pay us for using our money. And I think that's what's happening, is that you're going to, okay? And I don't know. I don't fully understand the process of actuarial work or anything. But to me, the equation I think the equation should explain why they want. They're trying to solve a problem, and yet they're using us as a solution, but they're not paying us in our aid. Okay. Now, there was I don't think the and what I have here is I guess I'm kind of talking about the health. What's the health of the retirement fund? And this is again 2012 numbers. But if we look at the I guess what I'm saying is that, and I'm just going to read a statement from that I picked up somewhere. It says, local government plan sponsors do not have to take drastic and immediate actions to reduce or pay off the plan's unfunded actuarial liability. It is being paid down in the same way you pay down your home mortgage. The annual contribution contains a payment towards this unfunded liability. Okay? And if you're going to live in your house, and that's the thing that the retirement fund we're talking about, this retirement fund we're hoping will go into perpetuity. And that means if it doesn't matter how long it's going to take you to, as long as you're disciplined and you keep paying off, it's going to work out. And then it says here, the health of the public retirement fund is not determined by the unfunded liability. The health of the plan has more to do with the city's ability to and willingness to make the minimum required contribution with discipline. With discipline. Okay? So the employees are going to make their contribution. And the government has to make their contribution. And if we do that and it's invested right properly, that unfunded liability, the difference of the asset and liabilities should balance out. And in time, and we're not expecting the retirement fund to fold tomorrow. And I see that as a solution. And also last night, and I'm kind of wandering around, but last night, David John pointed out, brought out the private sector, and they're talking about, well, what about our debt burden and all of those things. Now, one of the things I don't want to do is I don't want to aggravate or I don't want to turn away the private sector, because I know in San Diego, the private sector, through a referendum, voted the city of San Diego public employees to the defined contribution. And they don't know our history, but the people voted the pension fund into defined contribution. So I don't want to aggravate the business sector, but at the same time, this is what I think we can tell the business sector. If they're worried about our bonds, I think if the government shows discipline in any form, that will improve our bond ability to borrow. It's just like if you can prove that you can pay your house on time in a disciplined manner, the bank's going to give you the money. And I think that that's the same thing. If the government can prove that it could work down its liability and do it in a disciplined way, then I think the private sector and the lenders will not see a problem with that. And Milliman is the, I know Milliman has done a lot of work for the retirement fund, but I also know that I think Milliman is also the group that brought the West Virginia educators back from the defined contribution plan back to the defined benefit plan. and I think they did it in 2008. And then Dr. Okada was here last night, and she was saying she brought 100. She represented 100 people from GCC. That's the thing, is that I'm here. I'm the only teacher here. I'm the only one participating in the contribution plan. But I think that the people are the average person in the plan is working out there. They have families they run. So they're giving us a fiduciary responsibility to make the decisions correctly for them. Okay, that's what they're giving us, and that's why it's a small group in here. They're not crowding in. They're giving us room to discuss this and work out a plan. Senator San Nicolas, I know, brought up the Social Security, but I encourage him on his endeavor on that. But I also read somewhere that we opted out of the Social Security, and I don't know if really, I mean, it was a choice that we opted out. Okay, and I don't know what it's going to take to bring us back into it. Okay, so I just and I guess what I want to say is the government of Guam, the retirement fund is healthy. I mean, what it is what I have these numbers here. These numbers here, the net assets have increased in 2012. There's an increase in net asset. Not only that, but here, this is net assets held in trust for pension benefits. It's a positive figure. So what I'm saying is that on the day-to-day activity, it's healthy. It's very healthy. And so there's no need to have a knee-jerk reaction. Let's slow down and let's get our numbers right. Let's get everything in focus, and then let's see if everything works out. But there's no need there's no need at this point for a knee-jerk reaction. And I know, like I said, and I don't want to, Mr. San Agustin regretted bringing us to the defined contribution plan, and I respect his admitting that. Okay, but I also know that any accountant or anyone knowing anything about present value, they could have predicted very easily. At least do several what-if scenarios. So that could have been done, and I'm saying that we can't make the same mistake. We should do our due diligence, because now you regret it, and then if we mess up again, then this is the thing. When we mess up again, it becomes, to me, I think it becomes negligent. Okay? And I don't want to say criminally negligent, but I think it becomes negligent if it happens again, because we don't do our homework. So I respectfully acknowledge that Mr. San Agustin stated that he regrets the problem he's brought to the defined contribution plan, or has come about with the defined contribution plan. But I also say, if it comes down to, and the thing about that 1.8%, okay, the 1.8% for the government, the retirement fund's fiduciary responsibility is not to the government of Guam. It's to the government of Guam employees. And if they make the same mistake again, okay? If they make the same mistake again and we get into trouble again, I think that as a participant in the plan, there are some clauses in there that I think the Attorney General may have some action that he can take. But that's the thing is, okay, I just don't want the same mistake again. And the next time, apology is not enough. Okay, the next time it happens, apology is not enough. Because there are a lot of people suffering because of somebody's miscalculation. And like I said, future values could have been done real easily. Time value analysis could have been done easily to see. You can work miraculous rates. You can work medium rates, and you can work very low risk rates, and you could have predicted. You could have forecasted the problems that we're having in defined contribution. And so now, if you want us back to help you, give us a better deal than this. Because this, to me, this deal is not respectful. It's not respectful. Thank you, and I apologize.
I thank you very much. You've obviously done quite a bit of research, and as you would say in your profession, you did a lot of good homework, and we appreciate that. That's why I allowed you to continue on with your discussion. Thank you very much for bringing those concerns to the committee's attention, and we'll now continue with.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Michael Berdalio, and I am a member of the Defined Contribution. It's been referred to as a plan, but I really beg to differ. It's not a plan. It's not a retirement plan. It's really not much of anything at all. I do come before you in support of the bill. I think an analogy that I came up with respect to what the defined contribution plan is it's like taking somebody 200 miles out into the middle of the ocean and dropping him off. You can come back the next day and he's still there floating and things look good. You can come back the next day and he's a little bit closer to the island and things are looking good. But you're fooling yourself if you think he's ever going to be able to make it to shore. And that's what this plan is. It's a plan that, as Mr. Murphy has stated, was doomed from the beginning, and it's easy to understand why. Because this plan, which is basically a 401k plan, is really has as its history a supplemental retirement plan number 3, is what they were created for. Back in the 60s and the 50s and 60s. People had pensions and they had Social Security benefits. The 401k was created to supplement both those. So it was to come in as the third alternative so that you can have just a little bit more. And as you can get an idea of that by looking at the examples that the plan administrators for the proposed new DB plan have given. If you look at the report, for instance, example number 1, you have a annuity under the proposed plan of $3,500, and the defined contribution portion, the 1%, gives you $165. I mean, as you can see, that's what it was meant to be. It was meant to be that little extra at the end. It was not meant to somehow replace the $3,500, which is the core. So I am in favor of the plan. I do have the same concerns, I think, that the speaker brought up and some of the other concerns that some of the other senators brought up with respect to how it's going to be applied. Everybody talks about the word discipline, and that is what it's going to take. Senator St. Nicholas was right in terms of, well, what if after the plan is passed, the legislature decides to give this away? that's a risk that exists even with the defined contribution plan. The senators can pass something right now to amend the defined contribution plan and say, listen, whatever happens at the time of retirement, we're going to give them $200,000 and create an unfunded liability. So that risk always exists, and that's where the term discipline comes from. But hopefully we've learned from the old plan that the legislature needs discipline, or the government. It takes everybody to be involved, and we think the legislature certainly has appeared to have exercised it with us getting our house in order and coming up with a plan to reduce, or not reduce, but completely eliminate the unfunded liability. But with respect to the numbers that are presented by the Milliman Group, I ran the numbers, and the numbers work. The numbers work. If you take the sum and I compounded it not at 7%, which is what they said. I compounded it at 6%, and then I took what the annuity that they wanted to pay out at age 65 for the next 20. I did it for 25 years, not 20 years. I didn't do it to age 85, I did it to age 90. And the numbers work. So theoretically, the plan is sound in the sense that if you have the returns, which everybody talks about in terms of compounding interest, and then you have an annuity that earns a much less interest. I think the figure I put in for the earnings upon your retirement was 4%, as opposed to continuing to make 6 or 7%, which again is one of, I know it's technical, but that's one of the advantages of a perpetual plan, is that you never have to slow down your risk, because the plan will always be there for the next, and you can afford to keep the risk and potentially earn more return. But there are a couple of assumptions that need to be done, and I think I've spoken to you, Mr. Chairman, about that. Number one, we talk about the 3 highest average salaries, and the reality is we don't know whether those 3 highest salaries can be sustained based on what you've earned for the last 25 years. So I think the way the formula works is usually based on you going from 40 to 80,000, kind of in a regular line. I don't know what the effect is. We assume it would be a worse effect if you had $40,000 for 20 years and then made $80,000 the last 3 years. And so Social Security, for instance, uses an average of 30 years. So when your benefit is calculated, it's based on an average of your 30 years of income. If you work 25 years and you didn't work the 5 years, you get 0 for those 5 years put into the formula that they plug in. So I think that's one recommendation I would have, is to take a look at whether that should be changed from 3 to a larger number. That makes, again, the fund more conservative and makes it more likely to achieve its goals. The other thing is the idea that we have to think about whether or not you want to give the defined contribution people the option of whether to stay with the defined contribution or force everybody to go over to the defined or to the hybrid system once it becomes effective. Again, we have to think of this as Social Security, or how Social Security operates. It has two purposes. One, it's to benefit the employee. We want to make sure that whatever happens at the end of the day, the employee has a minimum amount of income that they can live on when they retire. But I think just as important is to protect the territory. The territory has to make sure that when you're ready to retire, it's not to go on welfare, because that's a direct cost that we're paying. It would be better for us to pay you out of a retirement or a pension fund than it is to pay you the same amount of money but doing it in the form of welfare. So I think it's important for us to think about whether the system requires that everybody participate from this day forward, so that the government protects not only the employee but protects itself and ensures that the plan is successful. If we all agree that the defined contribution plan is doomed to fail, based on the reports in terms of the returns, then you have to just cut ties and end it. The other thing I wanted to bring up with respect to the Social Security is we talked a little bit about it, but there's two penalties involved with the Social Security. I think everybody talked about, I think it was called the windfall elimination provision. And my reading of it is that if employees were to start, even if we were to start and get accepted into Social Security, you would have to earn a minimum of 30 years of Social Security wages in order to eliminate the windfall provision. Social Security is based on a percentage of tiered income, and the first the first 1,000 or so is 90% of your income if you've worked 30 years. If you've only paid in 20 years, it's 40%, so it's less than half. So that's the penalty. So even if we were to be accepted to Social Security next year, everybody would have to have a minimum of 20 years of substantial income into Social Security. It was doing this research that I actually discovered that even I had told people who work with me, go and get a part-time job because you need to earn quarters. Well, under Social Security, you can't earn any quarters unless you earn at least $20,000 for the year and pay it into taxes for Social Security. So all those that are trying to work part-time to get credit, they won't get credit if they just work weekends because they're not accumulating $20,000 worth of wages. You have to accumulate $20,000 worth of wages in order to get credit for your year of Social Security. So all the government employees that work full-time, there's really not much they can do now to get that credit. They'd almost have to get another full-time job to earn enough money to get that credit. The bigger penalty, of which I wasn't aware of until I read and went on the website, was to your spouse. Your surviving spouse would have 2/3 of your survivor benefits to your spouse deducted from her Social Security wage. So for some of us, I mean for a lot of us, if you're both government employees, not a problem. But for instance, take my case. My wife is a private sector employee, I'm a government employee. If I'm earning a pension of $1,000 and I pass away, she would get a pension of $600 from my account under the plan. Of that $600, $400 of that would be deducted from her Social Security wage. Her wage would be reduced by 2/3 of the amount she receives from her spouse. So that's a penalty that we also have to be cognizant of with respect to bringing in Social Security. It's a penalty that's there, so I don't know how we can work around it. With respect to the speaker's concern about cost to the employee, I also understand and believe that probably for a lot of employees going from 5% to 10.5%, which is double what you're being deducted, may be a high burden. And is there room within this program to take a look at it? And what I looked at was that the government's total cost or total cost, if we went to the plan, would be reduced from 29.85% to 29.30%. And that's as a result of I think the reduction from 5% to 1.8%. Is that right? So it seems to me that if you maintain the same government cost that they're paying now, there's room to reduce the employee share by 1 or 2% and still maintain the same cost to the government to, again, eliminate both the current unfunded liability and the unfunded liability of approximately $100 million that would come over if the plan is adopted. So there is a way, I think, to play with the numbers or shift the numbers so that the government, it doesn't increase its costs, but at the same time, it's not a shock to the employees in terms of paying 9.5 plus 1. So probably somewhere around 9%, I think, would still be doable, and it would still not cost the government any more money. The final comment I have is on the hybrid portion of it. if the legislature does adopt this plan, in my opinion, I would ask that they just eliminate the DC portion of it. The results of your 1% is going to get you probably about 3 or 4% more in income, but it's still going to have the same issues that we have with it now. You're still going to be in charge on being the one to direct the investment. You're still going to be charged with the one to make the changes if you want. And the reality is that for that 4 or 5%, it should be treated just as we have on the 457 plan, I believe, and that is have it be voluntary. If you want to put in another 1%, do it. If you want to put in, I think we can do up to 5% now. Is that right? It's $1 max. So still leave it available to employees just as, if they wish to continue to invest additional money, because you've already given them that floor ceiling. You've given them with that 9%, with that increase from 5% to 9%, and the government putting in probably around 5%. It probably would be lowered to maybe 4% and still maintain the same total cost to the government. You now have given them a annuity that outperforms the Social Security annuity and outperforms anything that is available now with respect to a defined contribution. It's not the same as the current defined benefits, right? Because we're talking about 1.75% versus 2.5% and 2%. So it is a reduction of some, 0.75. It's almost a 40% reduction in the annuity portions versus the old plan. But it's, again, a minimum for people to retire on, and that's how we are looking at it. It's something to ensure that people have the ability to retire. And so, again, I would urge, I respectfully disagree with Mr. Murphy in the sense that we if this is a knee-jerk reaction, it's got to be an arthritic knee. I'm sure, I don't know whether it was broken for years, but we're 20 years into something that everybody knew from day one was doomed for failure, because a 401k is not a retirement system. It's not a retirement plan. You can dress it up all you want, but it is not a retirement plan. And therefore, I urge you to take action. I urge you to take it quickly, because action needs to be taken. Some of these people have worked already 20 years. We know coming up next year. And the numbers do work if you make it mandatory. If you say that you cannot, I forgot to mention this, I know I mentioned it, if you make it so that after a certain period of time when it vests, you cannot withdraw the money. You can't go to Social Security and give them a sad story and take out your money. You shouldn't be able to do it here. This plan is there to protect both the employee, but most importantly, just as importantly, protect the government. And the only way the government can be protected from creating a welfare state is when you put that money in for this retirement, come back and see us when you're 65 and you'll get your retirement. And that's how it is with Social Security. And with that, I thank you for your time.
We thank you, Your Honor, for your taking the time. I know you were here yesterday and you waited a long time, and I apologize that you had to come back today, but I thank you very much for coming back today and providing this. You've obviously done quite a bit of research and have a number of ideas that I think are well worth all of us considering. President Underwood, you were here last evening also.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator Barnes, Speaker Wampat. Well, in a way, I'm speaking on behalf of the University of Guam, but I'm speaking more as kind of someone involved in government management and trying to imagine what's going to happen to these individuals who are currently under the DC plan. And, there's just a number of things that are coalescing in our society that is going to make this extremely problematic over the next few years. I went to a conference earlier this year where someone said that 1 out of every 3 people born today will live to the age of 100. The person who's going to live to age 150 has already been born. We just don't know where that person is. So this means that there's a certain kind of intensity about how we're going to deal with people as they kind of traverse this existence. So Judge Bordallo's accounting of going up to age 90 rather than age 85 is not a hopeful measure, it's a prudent measure. And as we look at all of the people who are involved, who work for the government of Guam, and we try to imagine what their lives will be like, and more importantly, what the institutions they work in will be like, because there's a kind of normal coming in and coming and going and an infusion of ideas. We now are really facing the possibility of people working into their 60s and into their 70s simply to just keep going. And what does that mean in terms of the quality of services? What does it mean for the quality of the lives of the individuals involved? It all means that it's going to deteriorate. And so the DC plan is obviously something that is not met. You know, the whole notion that somehow people can direct their own money into a pension plan that they can live on was always kind of fool's gold from the beginning. The only people who could do that were people who had enormous wealth to direct. And most of these people were not dealing with their enormous wealth. This is the same kind of notion about Social Security, putting it into these individualized accounts that people were going to direct, and that somehow or other, by giving them the autonomy to direct that they would be able to, in a way, place a bet on their future. Well, the pension plan, like Social Security plan, are not retirement plans in that sense. They're kind of social insurance plans. And so they're social insurance plans in that they are meant to guarantee a certain quality of life in return for service, and that the society as well as the individual would be protected. If all these individuals went into, who are eligible for the DC plan, or current DC plan, retired, it's obvious that the burden will shift to the rest of us in order to do something with them. It's inevitable. So how Mr. Murphy characterized it was kind of interesting, because he then posited that we're dealing with two groups of people. We're dealing with people who are on the defined benefit, that smaller group, and now this increasingly larger group, those that are on the DC plan, and that somehow or other they're asking the people in the DC plan to invest in order to protect the people in the defined benefit plan without a kind of concomitant or equal or more equitable distribution of the benefits. That's not how I see it. How I see it is that we're all paying for that. Where does this 30% come from? It comes from the general taxpayer. We're all paying for that. We have all paid for this year in and year out. When I came back into government service as president of the University of Guam, I was telling Dave O'Brien, I just don't understand why the typical GovGuam employee doesn't rise up now and, have revolution, because they're paying all this extra money. The taxpayers are paying all this extra money, thereby denying, the ability for the government to spend this money in order to protect people like me who are on the defined benefit plan. But that was the bet that was made. That was the debt that was agreed upon. Now, we still have to be faithful to that. And I'm not saying that we don't have to be, but we have to be mindful of the fact that the people in the DC plan are not going to be able to leave government service anytime soon. And if they do, they're not going to be able to sustain themselves. So the hybrid plan, or the half-breed plan, or the mestizo plan, I'm not sure what this plan is really, whatever it is, you can give it a new title, but in reality it's a new defined benefit plan, and so I think the judge has adequately characterized it as what it is and how it should be dealt with. But it's really the calculations. Of course, when, you know, that's the role of the people who are making the calculations to see if this is any kind of sustainability over time, and any good chance at a kind of making this a permanent solution. I guarantee you it won't be, whatever plan you come up with won't be a permanent solution, and it'll probably be revisited in another 10 years. But is it really a prudent solution? And is it really an effort to protect the individuals and protect the society? And I think this plan makes a good faith effort at that. And something needs to happen along those lines. So maybe it needs new nomenclature, maybe it needs a different sense, but that's really the risk that we're confronting. Because you have a number of people who cannot leave, and a number of people, and what does that mean for the whole configuration of government services, and what does that mean for the configuration of the quality of life of these individuals? Of course, the legislature in its wisdom could always give a $10,000 a year COLA instead of the current $2,000 a year, and then that would solve it for everybody, and you can do that with your regular funds. But absent that solution, I think it's a good faith effort, and it's a very prudent effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Congressman. Dr. Wayne. And it was just by order of who appeared. Otherwise I would have gone with you first, but please.
No, I thought I'd sign a little bit down there.
Yes.
Buenas and half a day, honorable senators of the 32nd legislature and members of the committee. I'm sorry that I have to read because of a lot of calculations. I humbly and respectfully submit this testimony in support of Bill 394, also known as the Hybrid Retirement Bill Plan by Senator and Vice Speaker B.J. Cruz. I'm submitting this testimony in my capacity as an economist whose goal is to provide an independent, although only preliminary, economic analysis of the said bill. Please note that my calculations are conservative. At the outset, I wish to disclose that I've been working at the University of Guam since 2007 and that I am a participant in the defined contribution DC plan. In reaction to this bill, I performed my own preliminary analysis of how the proposed hybrid plan would affect me compared to my current DC plan. After considering my personal and family situation, preferences, risk attitude, investment knowledge, and future plans, and comparing my current DC plan with the proposed hybrid plan, I am not sure if this hybrid plan would be better for me and my family. However, I support it in my personal capacity because it would give me the option to stay in the DC plan if that continues to be so, and if this is what I decide to do, while at the same time offering the choice to other current DC participants to switch to a hybrid plan. Both personally and professionally, I support this bill because I find it responsive to a number of issues, among which I will highlight two issues. One is the longevity risk that was talked about in last night's hearing, the risk that the value of the DC plan would not last long enough to support someone throughout his or her retirement years, or would be an inadequate amount. And the second issue being the GovGuam's budget reality. Like many governments around the world, GovGuam is constrained by its budget, mostly tax dollars, from which it pays for multiple programs, including its contribution to a retirement plan. GovGuam's contribution to a retirement plan is paid for by taxpayers. This bill addresses the first issue by introducing the plan that includes a defined benefit component, which would provide retirement income during the retiree's lifespan. To simplify matters, in my calculation, survivor benefits are not included. To support this, the bill proposes to increase the amount of employees' contribution from 5% under the current DC to 9.5% plus the 1% mandatory 457 contribution. In essence, this bill is designed to increase employee savings, although involuntary or forced, since it would be required by the hybrid bill. As we know, to save now means to spend less now. As such, it is difficult for most people to do, but it's necessary to support future spending, including those during our retirement years. In this case, the hybrid plan provides a vehicle for increasing employee savings by allowing them to make pre-tax contribution toward their retirement income. Individual retirees must ask the question, is the additional 4.5% contribution toward the hybrid plan worth the lifetime annuity that would make possible? To put this in perspective, consider the following illustration. A GovGlom employee whose starting salary, annual salary was $25,000, similar to the scenario that Speaker One Pat was interested in at last night's public hearing, whose annual salary grew 2.5% per year, who put in 30 years of service at GovGlom, and whose three highest annual salary average about $50,000. This retiree would have a total DC contribution from the employer and the employer and the employee contribution, and I'm assuming no investment growth, very conservative estimate here, of $109,757. If the employer were to retire at the annual retirement income implied by the hybrid plan, calculated to be $26,209, which is 1.75% times 30 years of service, times the almost $50,000, which would be the average of the highest three salaries, the retirement DC plan value would last 4.19 years in retirement. Would this retiree find it worthwhile to switch to a hybrid plan, increase his or her contribution by 4.5% of his or her salary in exchange for annual retirement income of $26,209 during his or her retirement lifetime? Of course, the situation improves for the DC retirement if his or her DC contributions earned an annual investment return of 5%. In this case, his or her DC plan value would sustain him for, earlier it was 4.19 years, with a 5% return, it would sustain him for 10 years. Although I have not worked out the calculus behind my calculations, these numbers, 4.19 years and 10.09 years, actually appear to be constant regardless of the GovGlom employee's starting salary. So there's some magic in math there, and I haven't worked that out yet. It is important to note that the retiree described above, the illustration that I made, would most likely end up relying on public assistance once his or her DC plan value runs out, which would be the case in the absence of a hybrid plan. In this case, his or her annual income on public assistance would be probably approximately $5,000 per year. This I based from the 2010 census data that shows the average public assistance amount of $6,088 per household and 3.76 members in an average household. The bill also addresses a second issue by reducing GovGlom's contribution from 5% in the current DC to 1.8%. Most of us will see this to be a negative aspect since a higher match is always preferred to a lower match. Unfortunately, the budget realities facing GovGlom cuts into its ability to be generous. In response to Speaker One Pat's comments from last night's public hearing, yes, I would prefer another plan where the employee would contribute the same as in the hybrid plan, 9.5% plus the 1%. It doesn't have to be mandatory toward 457, but my preference is not very strong there. But GovGlom would continue to contribute the same, which is 5%. The question, though, is whether GovGlom can afford to maintain its 5% contribution, again, given its budget realities. In this case, I don't have a calculation for that, and I would suggest doing further calculation to see what the budget impact would be of this alternative scenario. If an employee prefers to keep GovGlom's contribution at 5%, he or she should consider staying with the DC plan, where an option that is allowed by the proposed hybrid plan. As noted by Mr. Vince Camacho at last night's public hearing, the current DC plan allows employees to increase their contribution voluntarily beyond the required 5%, while GovGlom's match remains at 5%. More importantly, and in my capacity as an economist, I support this bill because when analyzed at the macroeconomic level, meaning in the larger picture, the proposed hybrid bill has significant positive impact on the Guam economy, as I present as I'll be presenting. First, I took the GGRF-centric reports from 2009 to 2013 to look at the number of DC retirees. The latest with the latest number as of yesterday being 629 DC retirees. From there, I calculated the average growth rate. How many additional DC retirees retire every year. And the growth rate ends up being close to 20% per year. As I mentioned already, the hybrid plan would allow the retiree that I described earlier to live on $26,209 retirement income per year, as opposed to being on public assistance at $5,000 per year. So what I did was to take the net income, the difference between those, which is $21,209, which would now represent, this is additional purchasing power for this retiree that would not be possible without the hybrid plan. I do have a table in my testimony. I don't know if I want to show it there. I could just summarize the numbers.
Okay,
based on the table that I have in my testimony, I hope that you enjoy it. It is preliminary and conservative. These are preliminary and conservative estimates. The higher retirement income for each retiree that would be possible because of the hybrid plan, and the growing number of DC retirees who are assumed to all transfer to the hybrid plan, would yield an additional retirement income of $16 million in 2015, and I projected it for every year until 2020, so additional retirement income of $40 million in 2020. This additional retirement income would be spent and respent, and hence multiplied in our local economy, and yield a total increase in Guam's gross island product of 21 million in 2015 and 52 million in 2020, and yield a total increase, and create 273 additional local jobs in 2015, 680 additional local jobs in 2020. The higher gross island product, which represents higher total income and spending, will increase Gov Guam's tax revenues through higher GRT and income taxes, based on my table, totaling 3.47 million in 2015 and up to 8.64 million in 2020. The assumption that retirees will not rely on public assistance would result in Gov Guam's savings from this expense of 3.78 million in 2015 and 9.39 million in 2020. The rest of the information is presented in the table again, but what I'm trying to analyze here is part of the impact on Gov Guam's revenues and expenses would be the additional taxes. 6 years down the road would be about 9 million, and savings from not having to pay public assistance to our retirees because they have a more manageable, a more workable level of income under the hybrid plan, and that savings would be about $9 million as well. I humbly and respectfully thank the committee for allowing me to testify in support of Bill 394. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for taking the time to do all those calculations.
It's fun.
Do any of you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Ruan. Yeah, thank you so much for your analysis. You know, this is actually kind of stuff I love to do. You know, my wife will come out like 2 in the morning and she'll be like, "What are you doing?" And I'll be on the computer with my Excel sheet open and I'm just crunching away. I mean, all kinds of stuff. These are, I speak your language. These kind of things are really, really fun. Yeah. You know, I was going over a table and I really I wanted to kind of qualify it though on several levels. Yes. The first is that you title it "The Macroeconomic Impact of the Higher Retirement Income Made Possible by the Hybrid Plan."
Yes.
But the reality is that this is really just the macroeconomic impact of higher retirement income. If they had this income in a DC plan, it would have the same impact.
Sure, but the reason I say that is because, again, with the DC plan, I see it to be lasting only a few years if you're maintaining the $26,000 a year. So what I'm saying is for people in the DC plan, after they exhaust their their retirement, they would be relying on public assistance. The hybrid plan would actually sustain the 26,200.
And that's what I wanted to
into the
really,
lifetime,
really
yes.
have a good conversation with you about, because if the DC plan got a 5% rate of return that you said here,
Yes,
and it only lasted 10 years,
yes.
how would that 26,000 be made up in the hybrid plan if it only got 5%? Wouldn't it run out in 10 years also?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
5% compounded on 26,000 in your calculation here would only last for 10 years under the defined contribution plan if they drew it at 26,000.
Yes.
So if you compound 5% in a DC plan, or if you compound 5% in a hybrid plan, it would still run out in 10 years. But the difference would be that the government would need to subsidize the remaining lifespan of the individual after that 10-year mark.
That is the proposal, is to, because look at the benefit to the government, that it generates activity in the economy, it generates taxes, it reduces public assistance. My point is, if not for the hybrid plan, if we stay with the DC plan, the government would have to subsidize through public assistance also.
And let's talk about the public assistance subsidy.
Yes.
Where does that money come from? Public assistance, is that paid out of the general fund?
I'm sorry, I don't know. It comes from me as a taxpayer.
Yeah, no, actually it comes from the federal government. Public assistance is fully federally subsidized, with the exception of some special programs that we have, but welfare, food stamps, those kind of things, those are all federal government paid.
But
And I'm in no way suggesting that I want that for our retirees. What I am saying is that this analysis here factors in the compounding of 5% under a DC plan. And if you factor that 5% under a hybrid plan, and if it ran out in a DC plan, it would run out in a hybrid plan. And you would need welfare to subsidize that. That welfare expense wouldn't be borne by the local government. And on top of that, if we did add Social Security into the calculation, then we would also have the federal government subsidizing the shortcoming, because we'd be getting Social Security coming in from the federal government, which also doesn't come out of the local tax dollars.
Well, my problem is, because the budget is, I mean, it's, if the federal government doesn't pay for our public assistance, locally, we have to bear it. So I look at the monies as going into the same account. And if you don't use it one way, it gets used the other way. They're competitive. So there is a cost to us, regardless of the source of funds.
And also, too, if we calculated the hybrid plan at 5%, similar to the DC plan at 5%, and it ran out in 10 years, the subsidy that the government would need to pay for that employee, for the remaining lifespan of that employee, would come from these increased taxes.
Yes.
Right? I mean, here you say the macroeconomic impact of the higher retirement income during the retiree's lifetime. Yes, we would draw more tax revenue, but if that tax revenue is coming from government subsidy, then pretty much we're cannibalizing ourselves to generate that tax income.
But keep in mind, this is, I mean, there is an intertemporal situation that's going on. Part of the system is the flow of contributions. So in a sense, I feel like we're looking at this in a static way.
That's true.
I mean, the contributions are coming in, and as people retire, those contributions should be supporting the retiree.
But then those contributions would also, if the contributions were supporting the retiree, then those contributions wouldn't be earning the rate of return that they need to pay for that current employee. So we just kind of be kicking the can down the road, and eventually that current employee whose contributions went to go subsidize another employee would need to be subsidized again by the next contributor and by the government.
As I said, the calculation is preliminary. There's a lot more of improvement that I could do in here. There's some ideas that I have to work out some more.
Yeah, I really appreciate the work. I mean, this is really excellent. I think that this component, along with a Social Security element, would for me be the best of both worlds, because then we would be passing off the risk of the longevity risk, the risk of the unfunded liability actually materializing, the risk of the government having to subsidize. That we would have the best of both worlds if we had both pieces there. You know, because you're right, this is kind of static. And if we look at it statically, those other risks all materialize. But if we have that extra component, because I very much agree with Judge Bordalio, the DC plan is not a plan. As a matter of fact, as a financial advisor, a retirement plan is made up of component parts. And a 401k is one part, a DC plan is one part, Social Security is one part, individual savings is another part, an IRA is another part, having rental real estate perhaps is another part. Everybody needs to create their own retirement plan, and that's one of the reasons why I think that the underlying problem that we have in all of this is a lack of financial education to really teach our people how to create their own individual retirement plan. But that being said, you know, I really appreciate the work, and I appreciate also what Judge Bordalio had to share, and I really appreciate you too, Mr. Murphy, what you had to share. I agree with you in the context of the knee-jerk reaction, not so much that this has been something that's been an issue on the table for a very long time, because Judge Bordalio is correct, but more so that I think that we need to really carefully look at this issue and determine how we're going to go about moving forward with it. I like what you said, Dr. Ruan, about having a DC component as an option, because like I was looking at some of the information here about rates of return, and you know, my wife has done very well. I was in the private sector, so her balances are great, but she's in the 30 to 40 range, and the average balance here is 30 grand, and she's like almost triple that. You know, and that's because I understand finance. I'm able to help her manage her money, and that's I think where we're missing the boat here. You know, I think that the experts need to be able to go out and talk to the employees and help them make financial decisions that are relative to their position in their you know, their work history. The reason why the defined contribution plan is so in the hole is because we went almost a decade of having the default option go into the money market for the retirees. So for like 10 years, people were just, you know, they didn't know what to pick, and so it went into the default, and that was just like a 1% savings account for 10 years. And I really think that, you know, someone mentioned fiduciary responsibility. That was a fiduciary, that was a dropping of the ball fiduciarily, you know. And so for me, I look at this whole picture and I see two things. I see an existing problem with the 3,000 people who might not be able to retire, and we need to do something about that. I also see the question of unfunded liability and the hope and the dream that we can get to 2031 and fully pay that off and never have to worry about it again. And I see this hybrid plan and the intent of it trying to come to the rescue of all those retirees that are in that trouble zone, but also in coming to that rescue, kind of wiping away that dream of forever retiring that unfunded liability and never having to worry about it again. And I wanted to close with this. You know, we talk about political risk and discipline, and it's something that we can all say we want right now, but it's based on the political pressures of the time. You know, I mean, you can go and you can come and you can testify, you can bring your petitions in of all the signatures, and depending on who's sitting up here, that might be just enough to tilt something one way or the other. And I wanted to bring up, Mr. Chairman, if I may read into the record, two testimonies that were provided in the packet. And for the benefit of those providing the testimony, I'll go ahead and omit the names, but they are part of the record if you want to review them. But one individual's testimony said that in their current employment, they would have to put in so many years, and based on the type of job that they do, those number of years would put them at a higher risk of performing their duties, and so they're recommending that we reduce the age down to 55. And in their testimony, they make a very compelling case to reduce the age down to 55. But what do if we do that? We create unfunded liability risk. And if this individual can make a compelling case to reduce the age down to 55, what if we had 300 letters and 1,000 signatures making that compelling case? You know, discipline becomes compromised as more and more pressure mounts. Another individual submitted testimony saying that they appreciated the effort, but they want current DC plan members who converted from the DB plan to also be able to go back into the DB plan. And we know that that would create yet another problematic unfunded liability scenario. But these are very real examples of political risk that slams against the discipline that we need to have as elected leaders and political realities in election years, most especially, make discipline a very, very difficult thing to maintain. So, you know, and those are all the things I'm weighing, and I'm kind of just sharing it because I appreciate the testimony, but I'm really trying to wrestle with the idea of how we can address those 3,000 that are in that trouble zone without exposing our generations to come to the unfunded liability risk that we're so close to retiring in 2031. And if anybody can help me reconcile that, that's something that that's a conversation that I really want to have.
Well, I mean, Senator, the reality is that you're right. It's going to take the legislature or the government, really, we keep saying the legislature, but it's really the government to have that discipline. But that risk exists now. It exists every day. Today, you have the letters. So if you act today to change and say that those who moved out of DB to DC can move back, you are creating unfunded liability. So that exists every day. The idea that because we have a defined contribution plan means that risk doesn't exist, it is not correct, and that's where I respectfully disagree. That risk exists today because you have the power to change any plan. You have the power to change the benefits under a defined contribution plan. You have the power to change the benefits under a new hybrid plan. So that political risk and that political pressure, I agree with you, gets extreme, but it exists every day. Presumably, that because now we know that we're paying 25 or 28%, presumably because there's a court order for the retirement fund to maintain its ability to not pay any or maintain its commitment not to pay any benefits without them being funded, that the light will be shined on those. Because I'll tell you, if you look at all the things that were done, and it's really funny, you have to go back to the old blue books, and you can see there's about 5 pages of credit between what was the original plan and what we finally stopped in 95. So I humbly would proffer that pressure is there. It's always been there. It's been there for the last 20 years where you've held the ground. So far the legislature and the government presumably has held the ground for 20 years. If it holds the ground for another 19 years, it'll have eliminated, the unfunded liability. So you're halfway there. We're halfway there to holding the line. So we just have to hold the line for exactly the same amount of time we've held the line.
But if we
or at least the last 15 years, I would say.
There's pretty much been a consensus, even of Dr. Underwood, that this hybrid plan is a defined benefit plan.
It is a defined benefit plan. So if we go
back, if we put defined benefit plan shoes back on, don't we run the risk of walking the same path?
No more than you do by calling it the defined contribution. It's the same exact risk because it will take the same exact thing to walk back. It will take a law from you. To my knowledge, the fact that it's a defined contribution plan doesn't eliminate any power that you have.
No, but for example, with this letter here for this individual who said they want this new plan, this new hybrid plan to go from 65 down to 55 years. If we reduced it from 65 down to 55 in the DC plan, it wouldn't create any unfunded liability risk. That would just allow for the individual to retire sooner.
If you don't make any changes to it, but if you say we're going to reduce it to 55, and when you get your defined contribution, like Dr. Underwood said, we're going to guarantee you get $2,000 a month, you've changed it. Unless I'm mistaken, I don't know of any law or any Organic Act restrictions on you changing the plan as it exists now. The plan is purely up to you and up to the legislature. They have the total power to change it.
Okay, let me re-encapsulate it for you. Right now, the DC plan, if we have a DC plan of Social Security, right, in order for us to create any kind of new liabilities under that DC plan, we would actually be absorbing it through the general fund. We would be either through a COLA or what have you. If we said that we're going to give you another $2,000 as a DC plan member, we're really just appropriating money to the retiree. Now, if we adopted the hybrid plan and we said the plan is going to have to pay out an additional $2,000 to whoever, or if the plan came up short, then that becomes an unfunded liability to the plan. And that let me finish, Your Honor. That unfunded liability with the new Gatsby rules will become like a bond liability to the government. Versus if we made some kind of special appropriation from the general fund, that's a one-time thing, doesn't create a permanent liability to the government. So if we put on the defined the defined benefit shoes back on and we walk this path all over again with the new GASB rules, we're going to be required to make up for unfunded liabilities versus having special scenarios where we're making appropriations to benefit people. That's one thing. That risk is one thing. But when we have this very same structure reestablished, we will be required to make good on it regardless of what the political flavor is of the time.
If you change the benefits under a defined benefit plan and you fund it, then you've not done anything to risk the government. But if you change the benefit under a defined benefit and you don't fund it, then you've created an unfunded liability. So the point is whether you do it through a general appropriation COLA or you do it through a change in the defined benefit, if you fund it, you have not harmed the fund one bit. And that's the whole point, is that change it however you want, but fund it. If you fund it, there's no unfunded liability. If you don't fund it, you're right. Just as, and I guess one last point is, just as when you asked the professor if the DC plan has the same rate of return as the DB plan, wouldn't it be the same? You're right, it would be. But the whole point is they don't. That's what the historical data is. That's what the point is that historically the DB plan outperforms a DC plan. And the other thing that I just wanted to say, with all due respect, is it's fantastic that you have been able to triple your wife's plan. But if the average is 30 and you're at 90, that means in order to get an average of 30, there's 3 who have 0 in their account.
That's right.
And they don't have the ability. It's nice that you want them to go out and educate the people, but you know, if they're going to go and educate the people and teach them how to invest, why don't we just let them be the investors? And that's called a DB plan. Why are we going to go out and talk to 7,000 employees and say on March 1st, put it all in Franklin small cap. On April 1st, everybody switched to Templeton Trust. Just let them do it. Because the actuary table, again, I don't know whether the calculations and you know, go to MSN, that's what I did, and go and do the annuity calculation. You plug in your annuity. You plug in how much money do I need to have in my account so that for the next 25 years I can have $3,500 a month. The number that came up was $464,000 if you're aged 40 to 60 or 30 years, so 35 to 65. It's $464,000. So then you go back and you say, okay, if I start out at 40 and I end at 80, what is my rate of, how much will I have in at my rate of return if I plug it in at 6% and I'm doing 2.5%? I actually did 2.4% because I knew they all did it at 2.5. Well, let's take it on. Let's go conservative. Came out to $469,000. So again, theoretically, the numbers match. Now, the point is with 10,000 people doing it, it should be okay. If 2 people do it, I guarantee you, one may reach it or maybe both won't reach it. But if 10,000 people do it, then it'll reach it. That's kind of how insurance works. That's kind of how, you know, those numbers work. I understand that your forced Social Security, it obviously has a cost. It's 6.2 plus my 6.2. It's 12.4. When for 11.3, I'm going to get an annuity that's 50% higher than my Social Security annuity. I say let's save the 0.9% and get 50% more. I understand your concerns, but you know, theoretically, if we get down in 15 years and that our unfunded liability is being paid off as we say it is, actually, if we come back in 10 years, we'll know where our situation is, and we'll have an idea of where, you know, that 24% can go. But I understand that you have those concerns, and you're right. It's going to take discipline on the part of the government to do all those things, to tell people when you put your money in, you can't touch it. It's really not your money. It's really Social Security money, but it's being held by the government of Guam. It's not a savings account. You can't go there and say, listen, my daughter's getting married, I need 10,000 out. No. You can't go there and say, listen, my daughter has cancer and I need 10,000 out. No. You can't do that. You can't do that in Social Security, and you shouldn't, and you can't allow them to do it in either the DC plan or, more importantly, the DB plan. You cannot allow that. You're right. It will take the discipline. And you're absolutely right, too. If we don't have the discipline, then it would fail. But you know what? It would fail. On any plan would fail if you don't have the discipline.
And that's and
That's
all of
true.
your testimony.
I won't fight you on that. It is true.
But that's where I kind of you talk about theoretically, and I want to talk about reality. And on the reality side, the defined benefit plan has a 1.4 billion unfunded liability, and the accumulation of that 1.4 billion unfunded liability, if you go back from 1995, let's compare it to the years. Hang on, Your Honor. Let's compare it to the years that the defined contribution plan was established, and how much unfunded liability from 1995 to 2014 did the government of Guam rack up, versus the amount of unfunded liability from 1995 going backwards 15 years did the defined benefit plan rack up. And the reason why I want to bring that and make that a point is because when you say that if we want to say, oh, let's just turn it over to them and let them invest it, and let's just be disciplined, the unfunded liability over the 15 years prior to 1995 tripled. The unfunded liability since 1995
but
didn't go anywhere.
But you know what you're forgetting?
And so if we want to take the island onto a course where we're not going to have to continue worrying about walking that same path in those same shoes, we need to make sure that we stay out of going back into that same kind of environment.
Excuse me, we're back to the asset liability equation, okay? And right now there's not an equation, because there's the liability side is really saturated and no contribution. And you're saying, in investment, you say you can't blame investment. Investment, now the investment's climbing up, but if there's no money going into the contribution, there's no investment.
We're getting about 30% contribution, so it's a fairly high one. And I think let's hear some additional testimony.
Okay.
I believe the public auditor has some.
Okay.
Did you have a question?
Thank you, Dr. Ruane, for your calculations. But what I really wanted was the paycheck that they're going to get every 2 weeks, just to see then how the employee at $25,000 really can afford to pay $161 every 2 weeks. That's what I wanted to see, and I have not seen that. If you can, I would appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Senators.
Thank you. Doris, thank you very much, Ms. Brooks.
Thank you, good senators. As I sat here and listened to the arguments, all of these are very good, very cogent arguments, and I think that the general tone is in favor of something. And so, Madam Speaker, Vice Speaker, Senator San Nicolas, Senator Barnes, I would like to read my testimony, and then afterwards we can ask some questions. OPA applauds the Retirement Fund Board of Trustees, Vice Speaker Cruz, the late Senator Ben Pangilinan, for finally addressing the plight of nearly 8,000 government of Guam employees in the defined contribution plan via Bill number 394. In our past two citizen-centric reports, OPA has stated that among the challenges this government faces is the DC employees' retirements are at risk. DC employees do not have a retirement safety net, as they are not members of Social Security and do not have some form of retirement annuity. DC employees only have their 5% contribution and the government's 5% match for their future retirement. According to retirement fund officials, the average DC balance is $40,000, just over half the average retirement fund balances in the states, or $77,000. The hybrid plan, for all intents and purposes, is the defined benefit plan for DC employees with a 1% mandatory savings contribution, hence the term hybrid. However, because the plan is far less generous than the current DB plan, another major component should be Social Security. Gov Guam employees should have the opportunity to become members of the federal Social Security system. Senator Mike Nicholas of the legislatively passed resolution is working with Congressman Madeline Berdali to have our government employees become eligible to join Social Security. The passage of Bill 394 should not be an either-or proposition of the hybrid plan or Social Security, but rather the hybrid plan plus Social Security. The federal government, together with the majority of the states, and I believe when I last checked, it's only 13 states who are not members of Social Security, have supplemented their federal and state retirement systems with Social Security as a major component. One state that did not is Michigan. If you have been following the Detroit bankruptcy, two of the biggest questions are, how much will the pensions of retired city workers be cut, and how much of the cut will be absorbed by current employees? Detroit city employees are not eligible for Social Security. Another jurisdiction closer to home is the CNMI. Those retirees have had to absorb significant retirement adjustments, and they are not members of Social Security. It's only recently that they have become members, and that's on a going forward basis. The May 2014 Milliman report states the following under replacement ratio, and that's on page 12 of the report. And I quote, "The hybrid formula provides a maximum benefit of 85% of the average annual salaries for the members with 49 years of service. Members with less than 49 years of service will have a lower benefit rate. For most retirees, replacement ratios of 80% to 100% are required for a retiree to maintain their standard of living in retirement. Therefore, retirees may need to supplement their income through additional savings, other retirement plans, and it's not singular, it's plural, other retirement plans, or working during retirement. Social Security is the other retirement plan, singular. Today's millennial generation is mobile and not expected to work 30 to 40 plus years in any one area, much less 49 years. Not having Social Security during their working years will put them further at risk in retirement. By joining Social Security, future government of Guam retirees will not be subject to the windfall elimination provision. And of course that you have to have so many years. But should they choose to work in the private sector, as many are doing now, or other areas to supplement this new GovGuam retirement? Social Security is intended to replace only a percentage of workers' pre-retirement earnings. Lower paid workers get a higher return than highly paid workers. It is these lower paid workers that our government should ensure that they are not at risk in retirement. There will be additional costs to join Social Security, as the FICA employer share is 6.5%. And this is the one part I did not understand until now. Presently, the government's match is 5% to the DC plan. If the 5% match were diverted to Social Security, there would be an additional 1.5% employer expense of eligible employees' payroll. But I just realized now, I think they're looking at 1%. So I'm not sure how this calculation will change out, but I was looking at taking the 5% match, and you have that now, keep that match, but divert it to Social Security, so that means the government of Guam would have to cough up another 1.5% match. Yes, the employee would still have to match that. Okay. Also, according to the Milliman report, if there is 100% transfer of DC employees, the unfunded liability would increase from $1.442 billion to $1.561 billion, an increase of $118.6 million. Contrary to popular belief, the retirement contribution would decrease slightly to 29.3%, and that's on page 5 of the report. Bill 394 is the first major bill to address the inequity in retirement for DC employees. I urge the senators not to make Bill 394 the only retirement option, but to enhance government retirement with Social Security and join the federal government together with the majority of states who have Social Security as part of the total retirement package. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify on this very important bill.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brooks. When I sent the letter inviting you to come, I was really hoping that one of the things that you might be able to address, because you can look at it from a very impartial position, is how would this windfall elimination provision and the GPO provision impact having both a government of Guam DCDB plan and
It's a DB plan, new DB plan.
and Social Security. Were you able to look at that?
My own research shows that these states that are participating now, federal government and states like Wisconsin, as I mentioned, I have the states that are not members of it, like Oklahoma, like Michigan. Let's see. Portions of California do not because there's a number of teachers, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Missouri. These are the states that do not, okay? But the majority of states do participate, and so when their employees participate, they're participating from the get-go. The government, the state is contributing into Social Security, and the state is also contributing into their form of whatever retirement DB plan that they have.
When Judge Burdell testified, he talked about the fact that you needed to have 30 years in.
We had Miss Maria Salas, and I'm not sure if she came yesterday, and she spoke to AGA, and one of the things that she had said to us at one of our meetings is what she realizes for the current DC employees who are retiring, she realized now they are not receiving an annuity, so she has not factored into and applied the windfall provision, even though those employees have not contributed into the DC plan during the whole tenure. Okay, so you're right. There's that group, the new employee who comes in January 1, who is a member of Social Security and a member of the new plan, will not be subject to the windfall provision. The 8,000 who are will be in some fashion, but to a lesser degree, depending if they just started today or they're ready to retire a year from now. Those people will have, let me rephrase, I apologize. Those people, those DC employees who are going to retire now, they don't have an annuity, so they will not be subject. The ones who, let's say, who are age 50 and want to retire in 15 years, they would have only contributed 15 years of Social Security and therefore would still be subject to the windfall provision. I'm a very good example, and I thought, because my husband's main retirement is only Social Security plus whatever investments, because he was in the private sector, as a self-employed employee. I thought that when he dies, I would get his spousal Social Security. When I looked at it further, I won't get that because my own, as a member of the DB plan, I'm going to be penalized. Even, I started working for the government longer. I have 15 years of Social Security working in the private sector, but that 15 years, I'm going to get penalized. I'm not going to get the full because I did not contribute another 15 years to avoid the penalty because GovGuam did not allow. And let me just say, I'm not advocating for DB employees to get Social Security. I'm advocating for DC employees to do it. So will the current, if they join today, be subject to the windfall elimination plan? Yes, because they, if they're in here today and retire, let's say, and don't have the full 30 years, but if some of them are working, again, it's a complicated formula. Just know that you are going to be subject to it, but a new employee who will have a defined benefit plan and Social Security would not be if that person were to supplement their income by working in the private sector or decides to leave GovGuam and work elsewhere, okay, because they have been paying all along. And that is the reason why, because they didn't want people to have, pardon the expression, by having lesser years, you are at the lower end, and therefore you might appear to have a greater amount of Social Security, even though you weren't in the system as long as others who've contributed for 30 years or longer.
And would you be able to assist us in providing something in writing as it relates to that, so that we can, I know there's only 4 of us here,
Okay.
and there's others that need to be able to look at that, because I think that's...
It's on the Social Security. I don't even want to look at what my penalty would be. I have just already rocked it out that I'm not going to even get it. All right, even though I have 15 years, I've just said forget it. Because of a lot of retirees who retired under the DB plan have been working to think that they're going to get an additional Social Security, and then when they find out, then they're saying, what's the use? Dibali, right? But if we were now, and we are going to have those who are going to benefit fully, those who are going to benefit partially, and those who are not going to benefit at all. There is that group of 3,000 plus or so who are not going to benefit at all and be subject to that windfall if we were to have to start doing it now. Anything that we do with the Social Security not being considered, you're going to penalize these current DB employees in the hybrid plan because of the failure to contribute to Social Security. And that's where I'm coming from. By not, they're not going to get as generous a plan. But as you had said, it's part of the total retirement option. Whenever you look at retirement planning, they always look at your current annuity, Social Security, and savings. It's a 3-legged stool. And a 3-legged stool, if you chop off one leg, you can't sit on that stool. So that's why, because it's less generous, I support, and the option of allowing, if and when we hear from, Congressman Berdalio, can we join, that we be given that opportunity to join Social Security.
You and I both joined government together 40 years ago.
Yes.
And in the 40 years that we've been in government.
Why do you think I'm still working longer? Because I had 15 years in private.
In the 40 years that we've been in government, the efforts to try to get into Social Security, are you aware of the efforts over those 40 years to get back into Social Security? And
Not really.
Do you have any idea when and if this effort that we all passed in a resolution, the possibility of it being able to be realized in your and my lifetime, or even in some of these, have you looked at that carefully to be able to provide us with some guidance?
No, I have not, Senator. I just, where there's a will, there's a way, and hoping that we can get Social Security. I think the chances were probably better if we, with the current DC, to go to Social Security, because even Marie Salas recognizes that this is not an annuity, okay? But again, that has been one of my, I have been sort of the thorn or the lone wolf in the discussions with the retirement fund. I've always wanted to have Social Security as an option, as a consideration, a plus. But I don't want, going back, my thing here is I don't want this new DB plan to be the only option, because the new DB plan would not suffice. And again, going back to their own report, they asked you to increase your savings and get another retirement plan.
And when we met in that summit 5 years ago, I still remember that.
Yes.
I walked out of there with you, and it was as if we had been at the ICU and told
Yes.
that we were getting ready to unplug.
Yes.
Dearly beloved. And so, in the years that you've been working with the Retirement Fund and Senator Ben, have you looked at how feasible it would be to be able to get into the Social Security, and what needs to be done in those years? Have you?
I was at one conference last year, and I talked to someone from the Internal Revenue Service about this, because I mentioned, and they were aware of what was happening within the CNMI. And then they told me that that's not an area that they handle. It's another area, and I did not follow up with that. But it is going to take a lot of concerted effort to join Social Security. I've heard people
even
say...
TS, Northern Marianas has SSI, which we've been trying to get
Yes.
for the last 40 years.
Yes.
And there's no question that we've had the will,
Yeah.
but there hasn't been a way. And so I'm just asking, inasmuch as you have been the proponent for Social Security, have you looked at how long it could or would take for that to be ever realized? And should we hold this plan up until we realize...
Oh, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just said, don't close the door. Go past this, and when we get Social Security, we join it. That's where I'm saying. I'm not saying, that's why I said, don't look at this plan and that's the end of it. Let's pursue Senator Nicholas's resolution to get Social Security.
Thank you for your thoughts and your insights on this. And I guess just based on the presentation that was given to us last night, because we stayed all the way, I'm probably even more confused, because your recommendation is saying don't just work with a hybrid, work with a hybrid plus. And on the
The
comparison...
plus is Social Security.
Right, plus the Social Security. But on the comparison here, based on the information that I was really intending to buy in on, and not for me, but for all those employees coming in. I see some of the younger generation here who've been in the government just starting out, and it shows the breakdown on the comparison of both.
Yes.
And if you do the DC with the Social Security, you get almost the same amount with the hybrid without the Social Security. So
The actuary, and he's there, has always made it an either-or stance. Which is better, Social Security versus this plan? And I'm saying we need both.
okay.
Okay, maybe
Okay.
that's
Maybe.
the best segue. We have the retirement fund people here. Why don't you join? No, don't leave, please.
Oh.
We need your...
I'm the lone voice.
No,
I've been always a thorn in their side.
Which is the reason why I want you to stay, because I don't want it to be just them. I want you to be able to respond to some of this. So why don't we have whoever Paula, who's going to come up from the retirement fund, the actuary?
And even as late as February of this year, I was still arguing for Social Security. And then I finally said, and then I finally just threw in the towel and said, let's just do both then. Because, you know. Oh, hi, Peggy.
Okay, who wants to speak first? I'll allow you. Okay, go ahead. Why don't we start? Maggie?
Okay, sure. I'm Maggie Rabowski. I'm the retirement funds investment consultant. With regard to the Social Security discussion, it is my understanding, even if you get into Social Security, it cannot be just the DC members getting into the Social Security. Everybody has to get into the Social Security. It is not a choice that only a portion of the people join Social Security among the government, the Guam employees, which is to say that the 6.2% government contribution will apply to everybody, even for the people who are currently in the old DB plan. You still have to make that contribution.
Then I'll have less windfall elimination.
Which becomes an affordability issue. If you think that the 30% contribution is already high, you add another 6.2% on the employer side. On the employee side, the sharing of the cost of the new DB plan or the hybrid plan is meant to reduce the possibility of unfunded liability in the future, given the budget issue. Now, if you add Social Security on top of that, that will add another 6.2% cost to the employee. So for them, it'll be 16 plus % from the paycheck. So it is not to say Social Security on top of these options is something that's bad. It is an affordability issue, in my view.
Yes, I would, Rich Wright from Milliman, the Retirement Funds Actuary. I would agree with that. We ran some numbers regarding how much it would cost if all GovGuam employees were covered by Social Security, and we estimate it would be an additional $29 million in payroll costs to the employer. If you're able to just get the DC members in Social Security, then that number was $18 million additional payroll costs to GovGuam. One other aspect for that is the employee costs would be 6.2%, and that is after tax, and so that's a reduction to their take-home pay. And so we have to consider that as well. The contributions to the hybrid and to the DC are pre-tax dollars.
Also, with regard to Social Security, it is a prospective plan, so it does not resolve the immediate crisis we're trying to address here with the hybrid plan, which is to say with 8,000 people who have already worked for 20 years in the past, those 20 years will not be translated into any credit into the Social Security system. It will be from the day you join Social Security going forward. Right. So
prospective.
Right. So the hybrid plan is hoping to address the immediate issue with the 8,000 people who are facing retirement with an inadequate savings to support a adequate standard of living, which the Social Security will not fully address for a portion of the population, at least. That.
I know that you were listening last night and this today. Can you provide us with some enlightenment, some responses to some of the things that you heard, some of the concerns that were raised by especially the senators? And I know that there was a government employee who asked certain questions, and I hope one of you took notes as to the questions that he asked, and if one of you could address his concerns. Which one?
We prepared a handout with some of the questions from last night, and I can work through those, and I'll just go through one by one, and if I miss any that
please
you remember, then let me know. One of the first questions was, what would the hybrid cost be if the investment earnings in the hybrid plan were 5% rather than 7%? if you remember, some of the benefit comparisons were done assuming the defined contribution plan earned 5% investment earnings, whereas the hybrid was earning 7%. So on a cost basis, what would be an apples-to-apples comparison if the hybrid plan were to earn 5% per year? So the hybrid plan, the total cost was 11.3%, of which the employee would pay 9.5% and the employer would pay 1.8%. If the hybrid plan only earned 5% investment earnings, the employee's cost wouldn't change, but the employer cost would increase from 1.8% to 3.8%. So a 2% increase in the employer rate.
Continue, go ahead.
Okay. Next question was with respect to a new employee starting out who's age 20 with a starting salary of $20,000. One of the questions was what was the difference in their take-home pay? And so we calculated that under the current DC plan, the pay period cost for that employee was $38.46. Under the hybrid plan, that would go to $80.77, so it's a $42 increase in the pay period cost from the current DC to the hybrid plan. If it was a Social Security, their pay period cost would be $47.69, and that would be an after-tax cost, whereas the others are pre-tax. So there would be some tax differences as well.
But you're still not telling me what his paycheck would look like every 2 weeks. I mean, this is what he's going to be paying. The employee will be paying $80.77.
Versus 38.
No, you're right.
So-
No, but I'm talking about if his every 2 weeks paycheck is $300, then minus $80.77. I'm just trying to get,
okay.
because then we need to factor the insurance as well, medical and dental, and that varies, of
Oh,
course.
right,
You know,
yeah.
And that I just want to see how much the take-home pay will be for the entry level.
Oh,
Yeah, and
Yeah.
because $80.77, of course, would be a lot for somebody at
Right,
making only
compared to what they-
$20,000.
yeah, and I don't have those numbers as to what their actual take-home pay is.
Maybe we need to get in touch with DOA then or something.
Right.
I think part of that would also determine whether or not that starting employee was a single person paying zero on their health insurance, or it was someone who had 3 or 4 children and was paying $400. So I mean, it's impossible to ask that.
Maybe the exemptions, the W-4s, the number
Yeah.
of exemptions that they have.
Go ahead, continue.
Okay.
I think it's important to have these on the record so that when we look at it, we can at least answer the questions that we thought we were asked last night.
Right. So there was a request to redo some of the benefit comparisons, assuming 7% investment returns for the defined contribution plans and the 457 plan, and to compare those with the hybrid benefits. And so this would be assuming higher levels of investment returns in the DC. We did those comparisons, and it increases the current DC plan projected annuity benefit, originally using a 5% investment return. The benefit was $1,651. Using a 7% investment return, it would increase the DC plan benefit to $2,296. This is for somebody retiring at age 65 with 30 years of service. We also calculated what that would mean as a percentage of their final pay, and so the DC plan would replace 34% of their final pay income. On the hybrid side, the 457 piece would also, we assume that would increase 7% per year, and so that the hybrid benefit would combine the DB and the 457 piece, that would increase from $3,747 which would assume 5% investment returns, and it would increase to $3,812, assuming 7% investment returns. So on that basis, the hybrid still provides a better benefit than the current DC plan. The hybrid percentage of pay that it replaces is 56% versus 34% for the DC plan. We also did a calculation assuming that the DC plan, if that was kept, but the employee contribution rate was increased to 10.5%, which was the level for the hybrid plan, and to compare that benefit with the hybrid plan. So assuming 5% investment returns, the comparison for the 10.5% DC plan, the benefit $2,560 versus $3,747 for the hybrid, assuming 7% investment returns with the 10.5% DC plan. The benefits are more comparable, but the hybrid plan is still a little bit higher. The 10.5% DC plan would provide an annuity of $3,559 versus $3,812 for the hybrid plan.
Is that, I know you had 5% will be the government share, and then the 10.5 will be the employees. That's
For the
what you did.
employee.
Okay.
That's right.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Okay, and the reason the hybrid plan still provides a little better benefit is has to do with what happens at retirement. So when somebody retires with the DC plan, they really have three options. They can either take the money out in lump sum, go buy a boat, car, spend it all. That's not recommended. The second option is that they draw down the money periodically, spend it during retirement. If they do that, they would likely need to adopt more conservative investment strategies. It would be unwise to be 100% in equities throughout their retirement because they would not be able to have the time horizon to recover from a market crash. So with a more conservative investment horizon, it would be unlikely they could earn 7% returns after retirement. So for those at retirement, we assumed a 4% investment return after retirement, which would approximate the cost of buying an annuity to provide a lifetime income. There was a question about cash balance plans, and so first some background for those not familiar with a cash balance plan. A cash balance plan operates like a defined contribution plan. It looks like a defined contribution plan, but instead of the account going up and down based on the investment earnings of the assets, there's a crediting rate that gets applied each year, sort of like a guaranteed interest for each year. That crediting rate typically is tied to interest rates on long-term bonds, which are in the 2 to 5% level. So you can think of a cash balance plan as a DC plan that guarantees a return of somewhere between 2 to 5% per year. So the benefits that come out of that, it's going to be less than a plan where you have a 7% investment return because you're crediting much less.
Just one more thing, cash balance plan. There are two stages of retirement planning. The first stage is the accumulation phase, where this person is still working, and the accumulation comes from two sources. Number one source is the contribution. Number two source is the returns. The cash balance plan addresses this phase by giving a person a guaranteed return. So it sort of addresses the fact that in a DC plan, the participant may have a have a difficulty in getting adequate return. So let's say you guarantee the return to be 7%. Then the risk of investment not meeting 7% is still borne by the government. So from the accumulation phase, if you want to do apples to apples comparison between a cash balance plan versus a hybrid plan, the risk for the government to shoulder the unfunded liability is the same. Now let's move to the second phase, which is the distribution phase. So in the hybrid plan, the distribution phase guarantees a floor benefit as annuity. So this person will not outlive his or her savings. And that is the guarantee that does not exist for the cash balance plan. When the cash balance plan terminates, when this person retires, the cash balance plan obligation to this person terminates. So you end up with a lump sum distribution. Now, to translate that lump sum distribution into an annuity, theoretically, you could go to an insurance company and say, hey, I have this lump sum of $400,000. Can I buy a lifetime annuity? But that is outside of the plan. So the cash balance plan only addresses accumulation phase. It does not address the distribution phase. And it does not assume this person continues to invest the money for the next 30 years after retirement. Now, let's just talk about going to the insurance company to buy an annuity. Upfront cost is 10%. That's the standard sales cost. Okay, so you take a $400,000 to take to the annuity company to buy annuity, you end up with buying at $360,000 because it takes $40,000 off the top. And the implied return for the annuity purchase is usually between 2 and 3% these days. So they're basically assuming this money can only earn 2 to 3%. And then because you're a single person, your mortality table is viewed as more risky. It doesn't get the benefit of pooling mortality together. You also get a penalty for being a single person going to buy annuity. So you get an even worse assumption on that side. So cash balance plan, if you have to reach the same level of benefit as the hybrid plan promises, it's going to be much more expensive. So if you work backwards to say dollar for dollar benefit between cash balance plan versus a hybrid plan, you can end up with much more contribution on the front end to reach the same level of contribution. So I think the cash balance plan was considered when the options were being evaluated, and it was determined to be inferior to the hybrid plan that was put forward.
Yeah.
Hold a second. I don't want to put you on the spot, Dr. Jones, but if you'd like to join this august group at the table, you're more than welcome to provide your insights as an economist. If not, and you don't want to, you may submit testimony in writing. But I really appreciate the fact that you're here and you're listening, and I see you taking prodigious notes. And so I'm hoping that it'll result in some kind of a written statement to us, or if you could grace us with some of your comments now, we would appreciate it. Otherwise, I just wanted to make sure that though you didn't sign up, I was hoping that you would say something, or at least provide written testimony later. It's your choice. Okay. All right. Thank you. So then we'll just continue. All right. Continue, Rich.
Yeah, as Maggie said, we did look at the cash balance plan. That was, in fact, the first hybrid plan we looked at. And the basic problem with that, in addition to the other things mentioned, was that it did nothing for the current members in the DC plan that are close to retirement. There was no way to provide any increase to their account balance initially. If you convert the DC to a cash balance plan, whatever's in the DC account goes into the cash balance amount, and it's a one-to-one transfer. So they would have the same initial amount in the cash balance plan as they would have in the DC account. It's just on a going forward basis, the crediting rate would be whatever the guaranteed rate is. So in effect, you're transferring from the DC to the cash balance. You're eliminating the downside risk, but you're also eliminating the upside from that can happen in a DC plan.
Did you have others? And I was hoping someone took notes of Mr. Murphy's question and can address Mr. Murphy since he spent 2 nights with us now. And I think, did you wish?
Well, you want to...
No, I don't have
No, I think he made some good points regarding the funding of the plan, the basic formula that he referred to with contributions plus income equals benefits and expenses. That applies over the life of the plan. You can look at it on a year-by-year basis, but really that formula only applies over the entire lifespan of the plan. And I think that there is a plan to pay off the unfunded liability, and so under the current DB, under the old DB plus the hybrid. And so I think the funding is still on a sound basis.
Also, there was one particular point I was confused about by Mr. Murphy's statement. And he mentioned that we're trying to transfer the DC plan balance to pay for take the DC plan's money to pay for the DB plan, current DB plan members' benefit, and that is not the case. When somebody moves the DC plan balance into the hybrid plan, they're in exchange for the lifetime benefit that the hybrid plan affords, which is actually superior to the DC plan itself can achieve. So it is not taking their money to pay for the current benefit of the DB plan participants. The current benefit of these DB plan participants are paid by a combination of government contribution, investment return, and employee contribution. And the historical composition of the benefit payment is somewhere around 25 to 30% paid by the government contribution, somewhere between 10% paid by the employee contribution, and the rest are paid by the investment return. It's about 60% paid by investment returns. It is not paid by taking the DC plan participants' money for that purpose. So I take exception for that comment.
If the public auditor was nodding her head, so I really do think that it might help Mr. Murphy accept the comment if we could get the comment of the public auditor, because I think her reputation, they look to her. She's the elected leader here on that one issue, and hopefully she can enlighten us.
The way the plan is set up, they are segregated, and whatever each member has their balances, everybody knows what the balances are, and they are segregated and housed in the fund. So there is no way that the DC members' contribution will in any way be applied to the DB plan participants. As Maggie did say, it's the contribution. Right now GovGuam is paying, just for rounding purpose, approximately 30% on all employees. 5% for the DC members goes as the government match. The remaining 25% goes to help pay for the unfunded liability.
I just have one clarification, Mr. Chairman, and that's the reason why Senator Ben put in the bill when if a DC member decides to transfer over, that the amount of the employee contribution that will be coming over to fund this hybrid DB component is only the value, the fair market value of that creditable years of service. Any excess, and we talked about this last night, any excess above
the total amount of the fair market value of that creditable years of service will go to benefit that individual in the DC component, the 457 side. So it's not that the only amount that's coming over to fund that individual's 1.75% times the number of years is the cost that will be transferred over from the employee's share.
So those that are short,
It's absorbed by the unfunded.
It's absorbed by the unfunded.
that goes into unfunded.
Yes.
And right now, the max paying is 100 million.
Well, based on.
No, it depends on who transfers.
So and that's kind of what I wanted to ask, because I didn't get it quite. The answer wasn't quite firm. I know that. First of all, it was mentioned that 8,000 employees need this, but the reality is that 5,000 of the 8,000 are at the average of 40 years old at a $40,000 balance. So we're really talking about 3,000 employees. Now, if those 3,000 employees, the ones who need it the most, of course, are the smartest ones who are going to take advantage of the opportunity the most, if those 3,000 all came over, and the other 5,000 said, I'm going to wait and see because I can, what is the unfunded liability going to grow to? What is the contribution rate going to grow to? And, how much is that going to cost in real dollar terms?
That's in the report, Senator. They have various scenarios. If 100% transferred that are age 40, that's actually on page 5 of the
No, yeah,
report.
they did do that, Madam Auditor. They did it by age group. They said over 50, but I want to know if everybody who transferred over the 3,000 who have the deficient balances, assuming worst case scenario, what is the stress test?
Okay.
If the worst case scenario happens.
That's another calculation you'll have to do.
Yeah.
No, we did that
Okay.
where we did look at that, and the unfunded liability, the worst case scenarios is everybody transfers over, the unfunded liabilities increases by 118 million. If you only look at those 3,000 people, the unfunded liability would increase by $43 million.
No. That's not. The 3,000 people who are short, it can't be lower. It must be much higher. If we have 100% of 8,000, with 5,000 of the 8,000 having more than the 40-40 average, then that means that they're pulling the 3,000 up. But if all 3,000 who are on a deficit, if every single person, whether they're 50 or 40, who has a deficit balance transfers over, what will be the unfunded liability? There's no way that number can go down. It must go up.
Why would it go
That number goes, per person may be going up, but because the sheer number of people has being reduced, so the total number is going down.
Senator, I had a hard time trying to understand that also.
Yeah, let me think about it, and then I'll get you an answer.
Please, because if the average is 40-40, and 5,000 of them meet that average, and that average is to bring us to equal, then that means, so what is bringing us to equal then?
It does not bring you equal because this is a benefit, right?
Okay, so the information you're providing then to me is incorrect. What is equal? What age, what balance?
There is no
Matter
equal.
when you transfer to the hybrid plan. Because under the hybrid plan, you're talking about a defined benefit. And the defined benefit portion is costed out in the cost of providing the benefit. So you can't say what's equal in the DC plan if they don't decide to transfer is not equal in the hybrid plan. There's no equality. Because
No, what I'm saying
I
is,
understand.
give me the perfect person. Give me the perfect
I
person
understand your
at the perfect age with the perfect DC balance that would have a zero impact on the unfunded liability. What is that?
I understand your comment. I don't think it was designed that way. So the credit being bought is not going to be equal to
The actuary can do the
money.
calculation.
When they calculated that, they're basing on the benefit, not basing on the balance of the DC plan, which is to say, even if you transfer all DC plan balancing, it's not going to be enough to pay for that because it's a benefit that we're providing to the participants. So everybody has sort of a deficit in that kind of a sense. So then if you just have a portion of people transfer in, even if per capita the deficit is higher, the aggregate is lower.
But the only reason why the aggregate will be lower would be if there's more people who are at least at the average or better, because they're pulling up everyone who's at the average or lower. if the aggregate is better, then there's people who are above average. That's the only way that this is possible. The above average pull up the below average. So
the average per person is correct.
So what
but not
what is the ideal average? A 30-year-old with a $90,000 balance?
There really is no, you can't base it on an individual basis because everyone has a different salary for the number of years. So everyone's going to have a different cost. And that's what Maggie was trying to point out. It's not the individual average, it's the aggregate of the 3,000 that's coming over and the assets that are coming over.
No, I understand all that,
So
but we still should be able to break it down to the ideal individual.
It's more like a curve based on age, service, and compensation. And those three variables will determine, plus their account balance, where their account balance falls based on that curve that you draw. And so, there'll be many people on that curve depending on how old they are. So the perfect person might be a 50-year-old with X dollars in their account with 10 years of service, and it may also be a 30-year-old with 2 years of service.
And the reason why I'm asking for what that perfect person is because my next question will be what will be the least desirable on that curve, and if all the least desirables converted, what will be the impact on the unfunded liability and on the contribution rate? Because our people are very smart people. They're going to sit down. They're going to be like, "Oh, I'm going to jump for this," and others are going to say, "You know what? I'm going to stay put." And so the ones who are going to move are the ones who are going to be able to take the most advantage of it. And we see the same kind of risk shifting in the insurance industry. That's one of the reasons why we have all these issues with our premiums and keeping the retirees also on the insurance programs is because it does bump up the risk pool. So assuming that the highest risk individuals choose to convert and the lowest risk individuals choose not to, what will be the unfunded liability and what will be the contribution rate?
Okay, I think it's still $43 million, and I think I have a reason why that's less than the 118 million. And that's because when 100%, sorry, lost my train of thought.
If you take the mean and you take all the mean below, and take everyone below that and they convert, what would that be? It has to be higher than 100 million. If there's people above the mean converting as well.
That is only true if the conversion is paid for. It's paid for by the balance on average, right? So because the credit balance is actually being moved to the 457 plan under this conversion path. And even for a person with exactly the same amount that equals to the actuarial calculated benefit converts into the hybrid plan, the balance is still create an unfunded liability because it's an additional benefit that's being offered to them in the future. So even a person who has enough money to buy in still creates an unfunded liability. That's why the aggregate is higher than a portion converts under any scenario. But per capita, unfunded liability created is different. And the highest being created per capita are for those 3,000 people who don't have enough money to buy the credit, right?
They are the most expensive.
That's right. Per capita. But in aggregate, it's still less than the total.
Yeah, but like in my office, the average age in my office, excluding me, my average age is 33. So my employees, if they all choose to transfer, are going to actually be in the system longer and actually, I think, contribute, right? Yeah.
More.
Yes, because I don't have anyone who's like 50 and will retire in 15 years. Yeah. So they're going to be in the system to age 65 for at least 32 more years.
32 more, and I was just sharing that with the speaker and the vice speaker was the difference in this new hybrid plan versus what's existing today in the DB, the old plan, and the DC is the opportunity to get out early with years of service at 30 to 35. Because at 30, there's no penalization. Before 30, there's penalization. But with the hybrid plan, you have to work. It's not about service anymore. It's all about age. And getting that benefit then. So it's like he said.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to have to work for 49 years.
And does the... I'm sorry, Mr.
But that's the thing, is that's part of what caused the unfunded liability.
Yes.
You shouldn't be allowed to do that early, because you're going to have, if you want them to retire at 55, then pay for it so they can retire at 55.
And that's why that together with the early out really increased the unfunded liability. The early out back in 2000 really did hurt the plan, because prior to that, the unfunded liability was declining, and then the early out shot it through the roof again, and now we're paying for that early out. And that's why lessons learned, you're not going to retire until age 65. And given the amount of longevity of where we are, like, I'm already eligible, right? People are living longer. And that's one of the fixes for Social Security, is to change the retirement age to a higher amount. And it's only incrementally that will need to be changed, because the Congress knows that that's the answer, is to increase for those born now. They have to wait until maybe age 70 in order to collect Social Security. So all of these do have a risk, senators, and the biggest expense is going to be those who are closer to retirement, because they're going to be getting are getting an annuity, but did not contribute as long as my employees who are average at age 33.
On the unfunded liability question, again, I also wanted to ask, I know the hybrid plan will provide a spousal benefit. Was that factored into the unfunded liability as well?
Yes, it was.
And also in the calculation, there was a gradual increase of people's longevity as the mortality table forecast. So an improvement of people's life expectancy has been figured into the calculation. I also want to point out, in the past 20 years, the retirement fund has generated 8.1% annualized return. So the 7% expected return is entirely achievable with a long time horizon. We know not every year in the past 20 years we have done that, or even every 5 years. You look at in every 5-year increments, we have not in every one of those periods generated 7%. But if you look at a 20-year period, when market goes through a complete cycle, we generated 8.1%. And that is the benefit of having a plan that has a very long time horizon, and we're very confident, given time, 7% is entirely achievable. So the expectation that's into the calculation is very conservative. Now, the positive variance above 7% will translate into eventually less contribution than it's forecasted today.
See, for me, and this is amazing because I'm a Democrat, but I'm not arguing, but I'm taking the position that I would rather empower individuals than turn it over to the government. Because for me, on my side, 8% is, that's the low end of what I would like to achieve. I get between 10 and 12. And what kind of concerns me is that if we have new employees coming into the government, we're going to be pigeonholing them into a hybrid plan and a 7% target rate of return, and an annuity to look forward to after 65 years at the age of 65 that's stuck at that with no Social Security. And if they wanted to move to a private sector company where they might be able to take advantage and earn a higher return and probably bump up their retirement, we don't offer that Social Security, and so if they did do that, they'd lose out on those years. And so those are the reasons why I bring up all these points, is because while we're trying our best to address the 3,000 people who are short, at what expense, not only on the unfunded liability side, but at the expense of taking away the power for individuals to be able to choose and get a higher rate of return than 8.1?
Well,
because I know that there was some laughter in the back about having individual advisement, but the reality is that if you really know what you're doing, and I'm sure Dr. Jones knows what she's doing, 8.1% is pretty average. for somebody who knows what they're doing.
But you have to look at the historical record. There have been 2 studies, and those studies don't take just exceptional people who are investors, but they take everybody. And they're broad-based studies, they're longer-term studies, so it's not just the last 3 years, the last 4 years, the last 5 years. This is long-term. And it's proven from those studies, proven data-based in those studies, that average investor is going to earn 2.5% or more. Some of the studies are even more, less than the institutional investor. I mean, yeah, there are exceptional individuals. That's what makes an average. But on the average, it's going to be 2.5% less. And, the data that was presented yesterday said that if you take that 2.5% over a career, 30 years, that means double of what you would earn as an individual. And that's why we believe the hybrid plan has that benefit. And that benefit, it's not trivial. It's a big benefit, and it just has to be recognized as data, not just our guess at it.
And Senator, I think you're exceptional investors, and it's really hard from my vantage point to expect an average participant to all become exceptional investors, because it's a zero-sum game in a market. When some people make money better than the market, some other people will make money less than the market. That's by definition.
And that's why, for me, what I would be comfortable with this bill, after all this discussion, offer a hybrid plan and let people choose. Also offer a DC plan and let people choose if they want to do that too. And allow for both to have Social Security. And if you want DC plan with Social Security, if you want hybrid with Social Security, if you're the kind of person who doesn't feel comfortable making those kind of individual decisions, then let's empower, then by all means, let's provide you with that kind of long-term annuity option. If you're the kind of person who knows how to manage your money, then let's give you that flexibility to be able to do that. And under both scenarios, let's give you this social safety net that we're all talking about, which really is the ultimate social safety net of Social Security. The hybrid plan is really an annuity. It's a DB annuity for people who want a lifetime guaranteed income. A DC plan is it's an investment vehicle, but all of them, as we've talked about earlier, are component parts of this big picture that is a retirement plan for every individual. And every individual really should build their retirement plan based on their own risk preferences, their tolerance for risk, and their lifestyle choices.
Senator, we're not that far off. We're hitting on 2 out of the 3 things. This plan includes a DC plan that can continue. At least for current employees, I have to say. It obviously includes the hybrid. I think the Social Security, as we've discussed many times, it's just a matter of how much the government can afford. And personally, I don't think the government can afford the plus the Social Security. It just, the numbers don't show it. And it's not only the government. I don't think the individuals involved in terms of their own personal contributions to their retirement can afford to add in that extra 6.2% either. And I think that's why we went with what we did. We were trying to keep this, this is repeating what we've said, but we tried to keep it cost neutral to the government. We did increase the contribution rate to the individuals because we think that there is a greater benefit to the individuals and that they should have some participation in paying for that. And that's where we ended up. But you can't be cost neutral if we try to do, I think, all the things that you're asking us.
And the other, I was just going to point out, I've one of the trustees who have been here for quite a long time, and I know a comment was made that why are we just coming to the table now with the solution in 2012 with the solution, and we've come and scrubbed numbers since I've got there. And Senator Ben, we've talked about this since 2004, and where we always reach an impasse is when we get to a point where we're looking at all kinds of numbers, all kinds of scenarios, and all kinds of different what ifs, and we develop this paralysis where we don't move it any further because there's opposition in one place or another. Yesterday I tried to make the point that there simply is going to be trade-offs wherever we go, whatever we choose. And putting more options on the table, although it sounds really nice and people can choose Social Security in DC and you can have a smorgasbord of different options, it becomes a matter of cost because the value of investing in the hybrid plan and moving these plans over is a reduction in overall cost because you create the economies of scale to be able to make bigger decisions using the same amount of resources. If you when Rich talks about the increase in the unfunded liability when less people come over, it's because you lose some of those economies of scale. And so we've looked at Social Security on its own. We've looked at it as a part of DC. We looked at it in a variety of different ways. We looked at the hybrid plan and different makeups of it, 2% contribution or 2% benefit payment, 1.9. I mean, we just had so many iterations on how to construct and reconstruct this a hybrid plan. And at the end of the day, what we've settled with is what we're presenting. Now, we think that it's our best approach to solve what we see as a problem, but there are many other ways to do it. We just think that this is in comparison with what we've been able to look at and what we've been able to analyze using not just our studies, but the studies by people who do this every day for a living, Rich and Maggie. We think that compared, given all the options on the table, this is the best combination of all the different components that we've been able to look at in terms of cost and in terms of relative value to both, not just the members of the employees, but also the government in terms of what they're going to have to pay today, and then ultimately what they're going to have to pay, as we get closer to the payment of the unfunded liability. It's not to say that this is going to be set in stone. We could come back in a few years and take a look at it and determine whether we need to make some tweaks. There's nothing wrong with that. Ultimately, what's going to happen is that, like we did with the DC plan, we looked at, we came to it and said, there's some issues with it, we need to address it. Hopefully it's not going to take us 19 or 20 years to come back and do that. And where I think we can overcome the impasse that we've had these last several years is if we simply agree that tomorrow we're going to need to do something. And that's where we are right now. I think all of us will agree that something needs to be done, whether it's Social Security or whether it's a hybrid or whether it's a combination of both. Something needs to be done because what we're looking at today with the DC plan, as Senator Ben has mentioned, I know we mentioned several times during our confirmation hearings, is that it's coming. And if we don't do something, then it's going to be here. And at that point, we're managing a crisis. And no one wants to do that.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. I agree. We need to do something. And this is the first major step. My only comment is, at some point, the unfunded liability contribution is going to decline, and if and when we are become eligible for Social Security, don't make this only. That's been my statement here. Don't make this only this, and never consider Social Security. That's all I wanted to add.
I also want to make a comment on the repeated message that this is a DB plan, therefore it's bad for the island. I don't think that is, the DB plan by definition is a bad thing. It is how the provisions are designed in the DB plan that matters, and how you pay for that matters. And just because it's a DB plan, it's going to, somehow make the credit rating bad for the island, which is also not true. If you look deep down in the facts, it's probably immaterial in changing the island's the credit rating. When a debt rating agency look at the credit worthiness of an entity, it doesn't just look at what's reported on the balance sheet. It also digs down to what is not off the balance sheet liability, which pension liability is one of them historically. Just because accounting-wise they now require you to put on the balance sheet instead of off the balance sheet doesn't change the fundamentals of this equation. It is the same. It has been taken into consideration before. Will just be more clear to be presented in a different way, but still the fundamentals are the fundamentals. And adding $0.1 billion to $1.4 billion does not materially change your condition. Plus, the unfunded pension liability is only one factor in the consideration. The creditworthiness of an entity also is being demonstrated on how you resolve the unfunded liability. And I think we have a very clear plan, and I do applaud the legislature for not passing the previous re-amortization bill, because that has demonstrated your discipline in funding this plan, which is very positively being received by the government, by the market. And I can tell you, GovGuam bonds are very hot on Wall Street. You cannot get enough of that if you're living in a state like my state, California. GovGuam bonds are, it's hard to source, and if it comes along, people just go there and buy it. That's a great testimony to the legislature to show that you do have the willingness and ability and discipline to pay down the debt. So I do not believe this hybrid plan will change the credit worthiness of the government at all.
If I could just add one comment also. I was an advocate of extending the amortization period. Until about a year and a half ago, I went to a seminar, and while Guam, as far as its security ratio was, way underfunded compared to most other states, the fact that we had a plan in place made us less risky. And therefore, that's when I said to them, I'm no longer going to advocate for extending the amortization period for the unfunded liability.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead and close them.
Okay, sure. I really appreciate you guys joining us, and I appreciate the very frank discussions, because what we're ultimately trying to get to is what's best for the people of Guam. I really appreciate your absolute faith in the absence of political risk here in this discussion, but I'll be very, very upfront with you. The political risk is very, very real on this issue. I mean, it's the huge 800-pound elephant in the room that is not going to go away no matter how much we say we want to attest to our discipline here. And that, for me, is the 800-pound decision that I'm going to have to really, really weigh on this. Because while the argument was made that we can do past whatever and put whatever risk out there, history shows that we've taken a course during certain circumstances. And I was a history major, and history repeats itself more often than we would like. And on Guam, political realities are such that, you're going to have people want to pass stuff and introduce stuff for the sake of pandering to votes. There were many times where I made incredibly compelling arguments using facts and data on the floor to speak out against things like tax credits that erode our budget, and to speak towards more discipline against borrowing. And on every single occasion, no matter how clear my facts and my case was for us to be disciplined, there were times where I just wasn't able to get it done. And that's political risk. Those are the realities of the situation. And while we all hope that going down this path of reintroducing a DB isn't going to open that door, I very much fear the reality that it might. And so those are just the things that we need to all consider: the political risk, the longevity risk, the risk on the rate of return. We have a really good presentation from the retirement fund that I think was a job well done. But we need to weigh all of those things when we come up with the final solution that we're going to propose as a final piece of legislation. And I thank the Vice Speaker for introducing it and for getting this dialogue going. And I hope the community continues this dialogue, because this will be very, very healthy for us to all come together and finally determine when that time comes. And we all hope that it's soon. So thank you all very much.
And with that, I want to say I'm very thankful that we have a third branch of government, which is the judiciary, which will keep us honest and keep us in line. And though sometimes we may cuss at them, they do provide a service of making sure that when the other two branches get out of hand, that they bring us back to reality and say, you can't. You have a fiduciary responsibility to the retirement fund. You must do something to prevent the braiding, the reamortization, the whatever, because you've got to protect the retirement fund for all generations to come. So, not that I'm patting my former colleagues on the back, but it is thankful that we have a form of government where there is a third branch that tries to put some reason to the other two. And that's the reason why I wouldn't be in favor of them being elected, because I want them to be able to make the decision that is the best for the people and not what would be politically advantageous to them. And so I want to, did you wish your closing comment? Go ahead.
My one statement basically asks the second branch of the government is that we will trust, but we will verify as well.
And with that, I want to, Dr. Jones, and for everybody else that's out there, we will keep the record open for 10 days. I really am thankful for the retirees that came in, but I know that there's many of them out there. A couple of them submitted written testimony. You can continue to submit testimony to senator@senatorbjcruz.com. You can fax it to 477-2522, or you can bring it here to the Guam Legislature mail room at 155 Heschler Street, Hagåtña, Guam, 96910. Please, we really appreciate the fact that we've had people come and comment. I want to thank the Retirement Fund for all the work, and I think it's imperative, and I thank Mr. Cruz for pointing out the fact that you guys have been working on this for many years. This was not something that was just thought up last year, and I know that you and Senator Ben, all of you with Senator Ben, have been working on this. Doris, I know, has been there since before the summit 5 years ago, and so it has been something that we've been working on. And I too hope that we don't come to an impasse and do nothing. And if it's necessary to be able to put something in here that does not preclude Social Security in the event that somehow we get, then we can cross that bridge when we get to it and look and see whether or not it's something that we can afford. And if it's going to be 35%, then we're going to have to talk about it and see whether or not it's something we can afford. But right now, if that's what it's going to take to address your concern and Senator Nicholas' concern of at least moving forward, because we cannot decide to not do anything, because there are people out there that want to do something that are our age, close to retirement, and need to make a decision on what they're going to do. And to leave them with an inadequate amount of money and the possibility, the real probability of them being destitute and on the rolls is morally reprehensible. And so I thank all of you. I thank the Retirement Fund for all the work that it's done. Those of you in the private sector who have worked hard with the Retirement Fund, I really thank you guys for all the years that you all put in, because you protected our GovGuam employees. And I want to, on behalf of the government of Guam employees, thank you for your service. And together, let's work to do something. And if need be, let's all send letters to Madeline about trying to get the Social Security component in. But at least for right now, a safety net that is a safety net is a safety net, and we need to provide it for the employees. With that, I will adjourn this hearing of the Committee on Retirement and Appropriations. Thank you very much.